Hello again, football fans. This is Anthony coming back at you with Two Fat Guys Fantasy Football. Today we're going to be continuing our series of off-season breakdown videos for the NFL rosters. Today we're going to be starting with the Minnesota Vikings. As always, let's jump right into it. Take a look at what the roster looked like for the Vikings at the end of the season. The Vikings are a team last year that did really well in terms of their win-loss record, but for me, they were the worst 13-win team I think I've ever seen. They could have easily lost half of those games, and it would not have surprised me. They just found ways to win, which is what good teams do. So, unfortunately, it didn't work out for them. But yeah, they were had a very strong win-loss record, but unfortunately didn't really play up to their record. For the Vikings, I kind of want to start with the offensive line. This is an offensive line that is fairly young and on the rise. Most of these guys are in their fourth year or earlier. Garrett Bradbury is a solid center. Christian Darrisaw is developing into a very good left tackle. He's really performed above the expectations that a lot had for him. The veteran of the group is Brian O'Neill, who they brought in to solidify that line, and it's worked out. It's a good line. When you have a quarterback like Kirk Cousins that doesn't move a ton, he manipulates the pocket well, but he's not going to get out and really run all that much. Um, Having a solid offensive line is paramount, and the Vikings have done a good job of building one. Um, the guards are a spot where you could potentially look to get a little bit stronger, but they're both still young and have room to develop. Um, Kirk Cousins is, of course, the quarterback. He is going to be going into his last season on his contract, and there's not a whole lot to be said for Kirk other than he is a winning quarterback. He knows how to win games. He's not elite at any one thing, but he is good enough, and he will win more than he loses. That's just what he's shown. Dalvin Cook has been the running back there for several years now. He's in his second contract, and is a very he's one of the top running backs in the NFL when he can stay healthy. He's been playing hurt for almost 2 years, so it'll be interesting to see what he's like when he gets back to uh, full speed. So, but he is a running back that is definitely worth a look. The handcuff to there is Alexander Madison. Very different style back to what Dalvin Cook is, but when he gets on the field, he performs. So, if you are a fantasy football player that likes to handcuff your running backs, this is a great situation to have. Alexander Madison is one of the best handcuffs around. So, good running back room. I do like it. Drafted Kene Nwangu a couple years ago. A great speed guy, more of a return specialist kind of thing at this point. It'll be interesting to see if he can actually develop into a real running back. But yeah, it's a good room to have. Of course, the wide receiver room is led by the best, arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL, and Justin Jefferson. Um, Put up monster numbers last year. Um, he's a guy that probably is going number one overall in most fantasy drafts. Um, he's just that good. So, not a whole lot to be said there. The number two receiver is Adam Thielen. Um, been one of the best slot receivers around for a long time now. Good route runner, just finds ways to get open. Um, good good number two receiver. Rest of the wide receiver room is a little shaky. KJ Osborne is a guy that has some potential, but it hasn't really manifested itself all that well. Jalen Rager, they brought over from Philadelphia, really highly drafted player a few years ago, but it hasn't really translated on the field. So the rest of the wide receiver room outside the top two is a question mark. To solidify that, though, they did bring in T.J. Hawkinson at the tight end spot, who is developing into one of the best tight ends in the league. He's in that conversation to be the top guy behind Travis Kelce, but very good receiving tight end. Also is a capable blocker. He's a guy that can kind of do it all for you. They brought him in because Irv Smith has battled some injuries through his career, um, and hasn't really developed the way they expected him to. So bringing in T.J. Hawkinson solidifies that position for quite a while. So this is a team that I do like a fair bit on offense. Limited in only the upside of Kirk Cousins. He can only do so much for you. But it is an offense that definitely is going to score some points. On the defensive side of the ball, this is where they've spent a lot of uh, draft capital as well. Lewis Seen, I liked coming out of Georgia last year. Uh, I think he's a very good free safety prospect. He's a guy with great speed and ball skills. He's a big hitter at the free safety position. Coverage developed a little bit through the year. He kind of started to recognize some of the coverages, uh, and yeah, it's. I'm looking forward to seeing him on the field, um, on the field more. But Cameron Bynum was kind of the guy. Played well. I liked him a lot. But yeah, on the other side of the safety position, we have Harrison Smith, who is at this point he is a regressing player. He's not the player he once was, but he is still a force back there. Very good at just about everything. He is one of the most solid defenders in the NFL. He's good in coverage. He's just been very good for a very long time. And as a Bears fan, I'm looking forward to him not being what he once was. The linebacker group is a good, solid group. Zadarius Smith and Daniil Hunter on the outside with Eric Kendricks and Jordan Hicks. They did draft Brian Asamoah out of Oklahoma to come in and potentially step into a starting role. He is a good linebacker, a very good traits. Let's say that the skills that can develop into being even better. So he's a guy that I'm interested to see if he can take the next step in his development this year. Um, Along the D line, it's led by Harrison Phillips, Davin Tomlinson, Jonathan Bullard. Good solid, good solid D line. Does a good enough job to let the linebackers keep them free to do what they need to do. In the secondary was led by Patrick Peterson. Cameron Dantzler was number two, and they did draft Andrew Booth Jr. out of Clemson to come in and push for a starting role last year. Uh, and he played well enough. He was overshadowed a bit by the continued play of Patrick Peterson, who still continued to play at a high level. But he is a guy that does have the opportunity to develop into something. He has the nice size and speed for the position. So this is a roster that on paper is very solid, and they did win a lot of games last year. But they've got a lot of question marks as they move forward. A lot of age, a lot of big contracts to some aging veterans. So it's going to be interesting to see how they end up dealing with a lot of that moving forward. So let's take a look now and see what the roster has done since the beginning of the offseason and as we get closer to the draft. So on offense, we'll notice that there's been a couple of changes. At this point, Dalvin Cook is still on the roster, so I'm going to proceed as if that's going to be the case. A lot of talk that he won't be around, but as of yet, nothing has materialized. So, uh, still led by Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, and T.J. Hawkinson at the skill position players. Adam Thielen did depart in free agency. They didn't bring him back, so he is now with Carolina. So number two is KJ Osborne and Jalen Rager currently. So outside of Justin Jefferson, they don't have uh, a lot there at receiver. It's a position that I do expect them to attack in the draft, potentially very high in the draft because they need the help um, because as good as Justin Jefferson is, he can't do it all. As I mentioned before, Kirk Cousins is in the final year of his contract, so it'll be interesting to see what they do at the quarterback position because right now they're backed up by Nick Mullins. Um, so they don't really have a long-term answer there. Um, so maybe they look to draft a quarterback early, somebody that can sit for a year and learn and be ready to go for next year. I don't know. Maybe they bring Kirk Cousins back on a short-term deal. I, it's a real question mark. The offensive line has continued to stay intact, no changes there, which is great for the rest of the offense. So the Vikings on offense took a step back. They just don't have a secondary receiving threat outside of Jefferson, and like I said, as good as he is, he can't do it all. So moving to defense, we have some changes. Eric Kendricks was released in a salary cap move, so that means Brian Asamoah is now our starting middle linebacker, along with Jordan Hicks. We did bring in Marcus Davenport um, for uh, depth for pass rush. Maybe they're expecting to get more from the pass rush out of him than they were getting out of Zadarius Smith. I'm not sure. It's a good signing. He's a good player. I'm just not sure how he fits in the current defense. He seems a little redundant for this defense. Sheldon Day is now our starting nose tackle with the departure of Tomlinson. Dean Lowry, um, over on our right end, is a good player, along with Harrison Phillips on the other side. So the D line is still solid. While not great, it should do a good enough job to keep the linebackers free. Um, our top two quarterbacks, Dantzler and Patrick Peterson, are both gone. They did sign Byron Murphy Jr. to come in and lead that group, and I think it's a good signing. He's got good size for position. He's got adequate speed for the position. His cover skills um, are, are pretty good. I don't think he's going to give you the coverage that Patrick Peterson gave you, but he's much younger and has a brighter future. So I like the signing. I think it'll help. Andrew Booth Jr. is now going to be expected to take on that second role. We did bring in Kalen Barnes as well. So it'll be interesting to see his development as well. I'm really curious about that. So the quarterback room is not special at the moment, but it is solid. It does have some guys with potential. We still have Harrison Smith at our strong safety position, and now we still have Bynum and Lewis Seen at the free safety position. So I do like the safety room quite a bit. I think the linebacker room is solid. D line is good enough, and the cornerbacks are not special. Overall, I think this is a team that has taken a step back from the quality of the overall quality of their roster from the end of the season. They're not as good now as they were at the beginning of the offseason. Um, I don't know how good they can be. I don't know how competitive they're going to be. I think they probably at this point would still have the second best roster in the NFC North, um, but that could change depending on uh, how the draft shakes out. So yeah, I'm interested to see this team what they end up doing this year. Like I said, it's a team that when I watched them last year, they didn't look as good as they ended up being. Like I said, I could feel like they could have easily lost several of the games that they won. So I don't think it goes that way again this year. But let's take a look at what they might be doing in the draft. Um, Buried kind of in the early 20s, if we kind of look through here, guys that kind of fit what they need. Cornerback is absolutely a spot where they could go with a Cam Smith, a Deontay Banks, another guy that might be available. Wide receiver is another spot that they might address with to keep the offense as powerful as it can be. Jordan Addison is a guy who might be there. Zay Flowers is a guy that might be there. They could try to address the guard position if Osiris Torrance makes it this far. Um, D line is another spot where they could look. You could look at the big ends for like a guy like Brian Breezy um, could step in and help out. Our D tackles, you know, the top two guys probably aren't going to be there. Mozzie Smith is a guy who could be in that nose tackle role. Siaki Ika out of Baylor, another guy that could be in that role. Gervin Dexter, another guy that could step in. Probably not ideally suited to that for Dexter, but he could do it um, and give you some quality there. Uh, Linebacker, I'm not sure is a real need. You may look at doing something. Um, to eventually replace Jordan Hicks, and if Brian Asamoah can't develop, a guy like Noah Sewell, it would be an interesting name for them. Henry Tuoto out of Alabama, Drew Sanders. So I'm curious to see what they do. I think they have some really big needs. Wide receiver is a huge need for them. I could absolutely see them going wide receiver in the first round with whatever their favorite style of receiver is. Um, I'm not sure. Um, there's a lot of quality receivers. Tight end is This is a team that I don't think it addresses the tight end position early. Maybe they do it in the middle or later rounds. Um, D line, Isaiah Foskey is another guy that might come in. He's more of a 3-4 end though. Um, it's like I said, D line definitely is a spot where they could go, and I do expect that. But there's a lot of quality names for each of these positions. But I think linebacker, D line, cornerback, and receiver are the biggest needs. Um, and luckily, there's a lot of depth at those positions. Um, for me, I might even look at a guy like Keely Ringo for them in the first round. He's a guy that I like. I think I like a little more than some. Great size for the position, good speed for the position, and a guy who uh, has the skills to really be dominant. Emmanuel Forbes is another guy um, who is a name to watch. Maybe a little undersized, a little light, but um, good ball skills, good speed, good size, but just a little underweight. So what we'd have, I think, for the physicality of the NFL game, he'd probably have to add a little bit of bulk, but he's another name to watch. So if it's me, I'm probably looking at quarterback or wide receiver for them in the first round. I think those are the two biggest areas of concern. Um, but yeah, this is a roster that has definitely taken a step back, and unfortunately, I don't think they're going to be in the mix for the playoffs again this year. I just don't think that they can get that same type of close game performance that they got last year. But that's going to do it for me. If there's a guy that you think that I missed, somebody that I should be talking about for the Vikings that I didn't, please let me know in the comments. If you have any ideas on what team we should look at next, please let me know. But as I always say, we're going to get through each and every one of these breakdowns before the start of the NFL draft. After the draft happens and we have our veteran cuts and kind of that third and fourth wave of free agency, we will uh, revisit each of these teams and take a look at some potential fantasy forecasts for some of the players on these teams, things that you might be looking to do in your drafts. But that's going to do it for me. As always, I appreciate every one of you. Thanks. We'll talk to you soon.